started to watch this movie, Millions, released in 2005. It's directed by Danny Boyle, famous for Trainspotting, 28 Days Later, and subsequent movies. And it was his debut as a director. It's a sort of comedy type fantasy movie. We're in the UK, and it's at the time that UK is switching to the euro, having joined the European Union. And of course, that means that the euro is going to be the major currency for business, replacing the pound. The situation is that two young boys, Damien and Anthony, their brothers, are moving house, and their parents have bought a new piece of land, which is at the time of the beginning of the movie, a house is being built, and they have decided to, the family have decided to move on. The boy's mother has died, and the father has decided to change locations to start on a new path in life. The old house, too many memories really. And so we then witness briefly the moving of the property, moving of the contents of the house, and we jettison forward as the boys attend school. And I love the initial scene where the teacher asks the children in his class who they would consider to be famous and who they admire. These boys, of course, are probably about 10 or 11 maybe, and they're heavily into football. And the answer from the first two is Roy Keane from Manchester United, and then the next boy says it's Ruud van Nistelrooy from Manchester United. The teacher, smiling, suggests, is there anybody else who isn't going to choose a footballer that plays for Manchester United? Bearing in mind that Manchester United were the most popular team around this time. And one young boy pops up, and he's a Liverpool fan, and he says Robbie Fowler, to which the class laugh. It's very much a sort of fantasy type of movie, but it portrays the innocence of childhood amidst this sort of fantasy type situation. And what's going to happen is that, well, I'll tell you in a minute. Two plot points worth noting is that there's a letter delivered to the new house to the deceased mother. Damien opens it and finds that his mother has entered a lottery, first prize £10,000. The father seems, played by James Nesbitt, seems not interested at all in this, more concerned about the boys learning how to use the microwave so that they can get their food prepared. We then move to the classroom, as I say, and famous people. Damien's then asked who he wants to tell the class, and he proceeds to give a list of various saints that he's read about, and these saints all appear to have some magical powers, most of which are not particularly pleasant in what they were able or not to do in the name of God. The class teacher uh, basically thanks Damien for his participation, but wants to move on. And his final comment on the classroom content for the day is his famous person, and we see a picture of one Nelson Mandela. It's extremely easy on the ear and eye, and let's move on. Following the scene in the classroom, we then move to the playground, and we see Damien being advised by an older sort of another pupil in the class to avoid talking about rather weird stuff, such as his sharing about his uh, inspiration from the saints. And the boy advises that he should stick to sort of more common sort of heroes like footballers. Otherwise, he will could well be construed as a bit odd and find it difficult to fit in, i.e., make friends. And Boyle pans out from the playground, and we see Damien isolated from the rest of the children who are in small groups and playing happily. Damien, poor soul, is on his own. Another cracking little scene. The two brothers go to the shop to get some sweets, and the shopkeeper says to them, "I'm not seeing you here." And the older boy tells him that they've just moved into a new house and a new school, and then blurts out, "Oh, and our mum's dead." The shopkeeper takes one look at the two boys and starts to feel sorry for them, and basically says, "Oh, you can have the sweets for free." As they leave the shop, the older boy says, "Works every time. You tell them that your mum's dead and people feel sorry for you, and you can get lots of free stuff." It's such a great plot point. Pure nonsense, of course, but maybe it works sometimes. Bearing in mind that this is a fantasy film, we then have a scene where Damien is inside his new home that he's made from cardboard boxes, and he's outside in near his house, looking at a railway line, and then all of a sudden, a female saint appears inside the box smoking, and talks to Damien about life up there in heaven, and makes the point that you can do anything you want up there. Damien then asked, has the nun seen his mother, who he refers to as Saint Maureen? And she politely declines that she hasn't, but it's infinite up there. Then, all of a sudden, a bouncing box collides with Damien's make-believe home that he's constructed from cardboard boxes, and this box that starts to open up. And guess what's going to be inside? This fantasy strip has such beautiful messages, really, for children who might be watching it. The boys decide, with their newfound wealth, that 25% of it is going to they're going to give to the poor people. Then Damien has a vision, and he meets Francis Assisi, saint, of course, who, after releasing doves of peace from a box, then advises Damien with regard to sharing the wealth with the poor. We then have this beautiful scene where Damien gives some money to a a poor person on the street who's trying to sell some magazine, and he says, "Keep the change," giving her £100, and she then sort of suggests that she's hungry, and Damien then suggests that he'll take her to the Pizza Hut, and she can have a free pizza. His brother suggests that you've given enough, but we then find that the girl has a friend who's equally as poor, and they have a change of plan. So off they go now to get some food. It's a wonderful scene about how important it is for youngsters to consider those less well off than themselves, and how giving is one of the most important things you can do in life. Well, that's my interpretation anyway. Danny Boyle, is he inclined to be possibly a member of the Labour Party, or into the notion of equality and looking after the poor? Well, that would possibly be an explanation. And the script is written by, and I'll find out in a second. And to give you some sort of insight as to how pleasurable this plot is, from this script by Frank Cottrell Boyce, who was also responsible for writing the script to 24-Hour Party People, another fun type of movie. It allows the gourmet plate, to become overcrowded with subplots. There's lots of chatter about the deceased mother, the father's love life, suspicious charities, famous saints, a pesky feet, relocation, Christmas time, burglaries, and more. And we're going to look forward to hearing about some of those as the movie progresses. It really is a satisfying narrative, and keeps you on your toes while you're watching it. We witness an announcement, a public announcement via the TV of the day when the EU comes into circulation and the pound doesn't become legal tender, which of course wasn't actually what happened. But and the advertisement, the announcement, we see Leslie Phillips with a nubile young woman in Father Christmas costume, announcing this to the population. It's all once again a very amusing look at this event. Leslie Phillips, one of the great actors, comedy actors of a generation. There's a social message scene where this man visits Damien, where he received the box of money. This man is clearly a thief, and Damien promises him cash, but a call from his brother manages to give him an opportunity to leave, and his brother then gives him a lecture on being wary of discussing matters such as money with strangers. It's a very, very poignant message amidst this plot. The older brother, Anthony, sees through this facade of the man who looks poor and sees him for what he is, a thief. And so comes back with a jar full of pennies amounting to possibly a few pounds and leaves it for him. A message that, yeah, you might be poor, but your activities are not going to be rewarded as much as honest people who go about their lives amidst their poverty. If you steal, then you won't get the benefits that we're able to give you, given our fortune. But it's a very interesting moral sort of statement about issues regarding who deserves and who doesn't, and how much. This plot is full of interesting little snippets of scenes that convey messages that are quite delightful. After dealing with the thief, rewarded him with very little money because of his moral position. Anthony then is browsing on his computer and sees an attractive girl as part of an ad for a water scooter at a beach. Anyway, Damien comes in and says, "Oh, that looks pretty nice." And his brother, Anthony, suggests that, referring to the girl, that he can see ones that are much better. The girl in the ad, of course, is displaying half of her breast. He then uses the computer to shift to an ad that's selling bras, and of course the women in the image have much larger breasts, and the bras are almost see-through, so you can see the nipple. We then get a sort of an exchange between the two boys about the fact that the older boy has become aware sexually of the importance of breasts, and Damien, as the younger brother, asks poignant questions about whether their mother had them, and of course nipples come up, and Anthony tells Damien that nipples are used as a source of milk by babies, and that he saw his younger brother being breastfed by their mother. And it's all a sort of education for children incorporated within this clever script. We next have a scene back in the school when the teacher is trying to educate the pupils about the importance of charities, and using the new money which is about to come into circulation, and the dialogue, or the monologue really, that she uses when describing charities. She uses an example of Ethiopia and the cost of actually providing water to the community, and how minuscule that is in relation to the amount of money that even young children have, that's given by their parents. And the message really is that you can do so much by giving so little, because giving so little collectively can have a major impact in other parts of the world where poverty is more acute. It's once again a script being used to make a social message to those children about the importance of basically thinking about others in other lands far, far away who are struggling to survive. The plot then starts to illustrate the benefits of money that has and the influence it can have, as Damien and Anthony start to distribute their newfound cash to their peers. Their peers start to show a different attitude towards them and start doing things to make life easier for them at school. And we witnessed the canteen where they sort of immediately get preferential treatment at being served at the head of the queue. And it's interesting how Damien's previous isolation for having some strange thoughts have completely disappeared now. He's viewed as someone who's very important. Currying favour really is the message. Buying friendship, and how this message really to children is interpreted really as something to be wary of, because you can't get real friendship by buying it. That's Boyle's message through this script, I would suggest. We move on. Now Anthony is into the notion of using the money to buy an apartment. He arranges to be met at a venue by the real estate agent. But when they meet, the agent is perplexed, expecting an adult, and Anthony makes it clear that he's quite capable of carrying out this viewing, and he'll report back to his father, and he brings with him a sort of automatic camera so he can take photographs of the interior of the apartment to try and convince this agent that the agent should be dealing with him. Again, this notion of when you've got money, you've got sort of status, and it sort of enables various rules to be bent because money has power. Damien then has a fantasy about meeting some Ugandan slaves who were around in 1881, a full 100 years before, more, in fact, 120 years before. And they shake hands, and the slave who's busy working points out to Damien in the fantasy dream that he was beheaded for literally being a slave and not carrying out his duties. So this helps Damien to get a perception of what real poverty is like, and what a complete lack of freedom is about. Danny Boyle presents us with a scene which is quite disturbing amidst all a film that has been
highly amusing and a great sort of watch. But when Damien is approached in his cardboard box house by this stranger who looks poor, Damien, because of his previous uh, contacts, sees the man as being in need of some cash. The thief, as he's described later, is an obnoxious character who's almost trying to groom Damien, and he's after some free money. Uh, and Damien is interrupted by his brother Anthony, which enables him to leave the thief, but he promises to come back with cash because it's been taken in by this notions of poverty always being associated with goodness. I find it a very disturbing scene and one that will shake you somewhat, I think, because of the vulnerability that young children have uh, when they come across our adults who are less than genuine, uh, and it conjures up all sorts of rather dark images of men who are on the wrong side of the law. Moving on from that, my last comment, when Damien gets back to Anthony and explains about this man, Anthony is clearly more insightful, and it shows a certain degree of sort of beware that man sort of feeling, and realizes that Damien's naivety is a potential hazard. He doesn't elaborate to his younger brother because he doesn't want to frighten him, but we sense that Anthony has a wider insight and is very wary of this man who's come out of the blue, and he questions his genuineness with regard to poverty and being poor, which Damien clearly hadn't. Anthony is quite a clever lad, and he realizes that he's got to get this man off their scent, and he realizes that uh, the interpretation of Damien's "we've got lots of money" uh, could be taken in one of two ways. One, sort of hundreds and hundreds of pounds, or two, about how a young child would save money in a piggy bank. And so Anthony brings a glass jar full of pennies, which is virtually full, but the amount in total probably numbers less than £5, and he leaves it for this individual, this suspicious, dark individual, hoping that he will realise that Damien's statement about lots of money was in respect of the glass full of pennies. So that would then lead him to away from this idea of gaining large amounts of money through fear. As mentioned before, the story about Ethiopia, I think the point that I'd like to re-emphasize really is the significance of charities. The problem is with charities is that the donated money tends to be tends to go towards administration rather than to the actual cause, and so the money doesn't get through, and this leads to a cynicism, of course, by people who are donating, because they don't believe that the money is getting to where it should go. But if we could guarantee that sort of what you actually give is actually arriving at the place, the charities could have a much greater impact on parts of the world which are sadly lacking in basic amenities like clean water, like toilets, like uh, public, well, sewage disposal, for example, or simple, uh, simple drugs used for basic sort of care, or in some instances for major impacts on the community. I note what can happen with so little money in terms of uh, dealing with uh, blindness through glaucoma in on the African continent, and how this condition could easily be treated for a minimal amount if one could get the expertise out there. And this is what's facing the world, really. And in this movie, Millions, the the script exposes the lacking in terms of help by the rich towards the poor, whether it be government or whether it be the facility for charities to carry out what they want to do. where their friend is looking after them with money, taking them out and buying things for them. Yeah. This idea of people hanging on to those with money for their own selfish greed. But on the other hand, of course, some of them are quite genuinely in need and should be helped. This is the message, I think. The house. The police are called in to try and disperse the crowd. They nosy around and find lots of new equipment, digital equipment. Curious as to why it's all arrived so quickly, and expensive pieces. Of course, the father and the girlfriend have converted that money, that sterling, into things to buy. At the same time, young Damien has decided to flee the house, and he's taken with him another bag of money, and he's heading for the railway line near where his cardboard house is. He doesn't want to be around either when the thief comes to the house. Right. The thief arrives at the house after being contacted by phone by Damien. Damien has fled the house with the bag of money, but the thief then engages with Anthony as to where the money is. Anthony, of course, doesn't know that Damien has left, so suggests he go upstairs, and soon he's accosted by the police. But Damien, having made his way to the railway line, has now proceeded to dump the money on the railway line, and he's then met by the spirit of his mother. As the money burns furiously and the train whizzes past, Damien then sees the spirit of his mother. He knows it's a dream, but he basically starts off by telling her that money has become the root of all his problems, and his mother agrees to talk with him for 5 minutes to give some advice on life. The main bit, one, to not worry about her, but also some practical advice, like, for example, to look after his hair with good shampoo, to help his brother who although pretending that he's handling the grief of his mother's death, is actually finding it just as difficult as Damien is. And it's all very much part and parcel of advice that is given by adults to children when a parent passes. This is where the script really mirrors real life through and through. And it's to be applauded, really, even though it's a comedy and a fantasy. It's also a huge chunk of reality about life's ups and downs, the issues surrounding money, the issues surrounding trust and faith, and mother gives the final words of wisdom to her son about the complications of money, and refers to Damien's father and his new relationship, the complications regarding people, and how we all fit together. And then Damien asks about miracles. Is his mother a saint? In reference to the fact that to become a saint, one has to perform a miracle. That's what the church dictates. And his mother comes back and says, well, it's not quite as simple as you might say, but yes, I have performed a miracle. I have created a miracle.
And Damien says, "Well, what exactly is it?" And she answers, "You are the miracle." And in many ways, life is a miraculous journey. If you think about the conception and the high improbability of a sperm connecting with an egg and that developing into a human being, that whole process is a complete miracle. Beg one to suggest that why would one want to leave the luxury provided? So as you can see, it's a bit of a farcical sort of situation, but I did enjoy Newman in it. And the role played by the woman is also worth a visit. So nothing to shake you here. Sort of street-wise film. No glamour, but it's about junkies going about their business on the streets of getting high, then beg, stealing and borrowing any cash so they could beg, stealing and borrowing anything they can get their hands on.
The final frame of this beautiful movie shows how each of the four members of the family, the two boys, the father and the girlfriend, view the money that's come by their way. And the girlfriend, father and Anthony all have lists of wants, material wants. And then we come to the final page, really, and we learn what Damien wants. And we see it mapped out. And you're going to have to watch the movie to work out what Damien wanted to use his money for. My final word on it. It's an absolutely brilliant soundtrack to this movie. Some of the music is really good, including sort of world music, electronic music. I thought I caught possibly Radiohead, but I may be wrong on that. But the African music is wonderful. Right, final point on this movie. There's a very extensive plot on Wikipedia if you want to look at that. It differs to an extent with mine because the implications of the plot twists isn't expanded on as thoroughly as I'd done. And some of the actual facts have been slightly changed by yours truly. As, for example, I wasn't aware that the place where the family moved to was, in fact, Windus in Lancashire. But it makes for fascinating reading alongside my interpretation. And the beauty of cinema, of course, is that you can actually review your own and put your own spin on it. And that's absolutely fine. You can miss bits out, add bits in, interpret the characters in a slightly different way. And that's the beauty of movies, any sort of creative art, that you have the license to make your own interpretation.